The story begins on the bustling streets of Manila, where life moves with the rhythm of jeepneys, market vendors, and the endless shuffle of people trying to make it through another day. Among the noise, the heat, and the chaos of the city lived a boy named Juan. He was small in stature, thin from struggle, but carried a spark in his eyes that refused to be dimmed. Juan was only 12 years old, yet he had already tasted the bitterness of hardship more than most adults ever would. Every morning, before the sun stretched its golden rays across the rooftops of the city, he would wake up, brush off the dust from his worn-out clothes, and prepare himself to face another day in a world that had never handed him anything easily. He lived with his mother in a fragile shanty constructed from scraps of wood, rusted tin, and pieces of tarp. When it rained, the leaks turned their small home into a maze of dripping water they tried to avoid through the night. His father had disappeared years ago, leaving behind only distant memories and a guitar with broken strings. Despite everything, Juan never complained. He knew his mother worked every hour she could just to buy rice and sometimes a small piece of fish for the two of them to share. She loved him fiercely, and that love became the anchor that kept him steady through the storms of their life. Every day after school, if he managed to attend, Juan would go to the busy streets near the Manila Bay, where tourists and locals gathered. There, he would sing. Singing was his escape, his joy, and also his only way to earn spare coins to help his mother. His voice had a raw purity, a kind of gentle yet powerful tone that made strangers stop walking and turn their heads. But even with the talent he carried, the street was not a stage designed to celebrate him. Trucks drove by loudly, people rushed past him, and sometimes he had to endure unkind words from those who didn't understand the dreams of a poor boy with a big voice. Still, he sang, and every night when he came home with a handful of coins, his mother would cradle his face and whisper how proud she was. But inside, Juan dreamed of more. He dreamed of a moment where he could show the world what he truly had inside him. He dreamed of a stage with bright lights and judges on a panel watching him with awe. He dreamed of a moment where he would sing not for coins, but for something greater. A moment where his voice would rise and change everything. One evening, after singing by the bay, a foreign tourist approached him. The man had been listening for several minutes, recording on his phone. He asked Juan where he learned to sing like that, and Juan simply smiled shyly and said he learned from listening to old CDs and trying to mimic the singers he admired. The tourist handed him a few dollars, more than Juan usually made in a full week, and asked if he could upload the boy's singing on social media. Juan nodded, not thinking much of it. He had no idea that video was about to take on a life of its own. Within days, the video spread across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram. People from around the world began sharing it, using captions like "This kid from Manila sings like an angel and future superstar right here." Some even tagged talent shows. But the biggest surprise came when someone tagged the official page of a massive show watched by millions, America's Got Talent. Not long after, an email arrived at a local community center where Juan sometimes sang during events. It was addressed to him. The American show was inviting him for an audition. At first, he thought it was a joke. Why would the biggest talent show in the world reach out to someone like him? Why would they choose a boy who barely had enough food to eat some days? But when the organizers called and spoke to him directly, confirming everything, reality hit him with overwhelming force. His mother cried. Juan cried. For the first time, the impossible seemed possible. Getting to America, however, was a challenge. They had no money for travel. Weeks passed with no clear solution, and their hopes began to fade until a local charity organization heard the story and offered to sponsor the entire trip. The people in Juan's community rallied behind him, giving him notebooks, clothes, and even a small Philippine flag to carry with him. For the first time in his life, Juan boarded a plane, holding his mother's hand tightly. As the plane lifted off the ground, he watched Manila disappear beneath the clouds, feeling equal parts excitement and fear. When they arrived in Los Angeles, everything felt larger than life. The buildings stood like giants, the streets seemed endless, and the air carried a kind of electric magic that made Juan's heart beat faster. But nothing compared to the moment he walked into the AGT theater for the first time. The glowing lights, the massive stage, the audience seats stretching farther than his eyes could see, it all felt unreal. He had spent years singing on streets where people barely noticed him, and now he stood where the world's biggest talents had stood before. Backstage, contestants bustled around him, dancers stretching, magicians rehearsing tricks, singers warming up. Juan sat quietly with his mother, clutching the old guitar his father left behind. It had been restrung for the show, but it still carried its scars. He wore his most presentable outfit, a simple white shirt and jeans that didn't quite fit, but he didn't care. He had come not for style, but for a chance to make his dreams come alive. Finally, a crew member called his name. Juan's heart raced. His mother hugged him tightly and whispered, "No matter what happens out there, you've already made us proud." He stepped onto the stage, his legs trembling. The audience murmured, curious about the small boy standing in front of them. The judges watched him with interest, including the one he admired most, Simon Cowell. Simon leaned forward and asked gently, "Hello there. What's your name?" Juan cleared his throat. "My name is Juan, sir. I'm from Manila, Philippines." The audience applauded. Simon asked, "And how old are you, Juan?" "I'm 12, sir." Simon smiled. "And why did you come to America's Got Talent?" Juan's voice cracked slightly as he answered, "I came because I want to help my mom have a better life. And I want to share my voice with the world." Simon nodded thoughtfully. "Okay, Juan, we're ready to hear you. Take your time." Juan closed his eyes. He could hear his heartbeat pounding louder than the crowd. He took a deep breath, lifted his guitar, and let the first note escape his lips. What followed was a moment people in the audience would never forget. His voice floated into the air, soft at first, then growing stronger, richer, more powerful. The purity of his tone, the emotion in his delivery, and the heartbreaking sincerity in his voice drew everyone in instantly. The audience grew still, even the cameras seemed to linger on him longer, as though mesmerized. As he reached the chorus, the theater filled with a breathtaking mix of awe and silence. His high notes soared effortlessly, echoing through the auditorium. People in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Simon Cowell slowly placed a hand over his chest, visibly moved. By the time Juan sang the final note, the entire theater rose to its feet in a standing ovation. He opened his eyes and saw the sight he had only dreamed about, thousands of people cheering, clapping, screaming his name. Tears streamed down his face. He had never felt that kind of love, that kind of acceptance. He had spent years singing to strangers who barely looked at him. Now, he stood on the most famous stage in the world, and everyone was looking only at him. The judges took a moment before speaking. Heidi was wiping tears. Sophia called him a miracle. Howie declared he was witnessing the birth of a future superstar. But the real moment came when everyone looked toward Simon. He leaned forward, the audience falling silent in anticipation. Simon spoke softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Juan, you are special. You have a gift that comes from the deepest place of your heart. And I think today, the world needed to hear you." Then he paused, smiling gently. "So, I'm going to make sure the world never forgets you." He stood up and reached his hand toward the golden buzzer. The crowd erupted before he even pressed it. Juan covered his mouth, trembling, as Simon slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer with full force. Instantly, golden confetti burst into the air, cascading down like falling stars. The dramatic music thundered through the theater. Juan's mother ran onto the stage, tears pouring down her face as she hugged her son tightly. Juan collapsed into her arms, overwhelmed with joy. The confetti coated his hair, his clothes, the stage floor, everything around him sparkled with gold. Simon walked onto the stage, shook Juan's hand, and said, "You deserve this moment. Never stop singing." From that instant, Juan's life changed forever. News outlets from around the world started featuring the boy from Manila who had captured the heart of the toughest judge in show business. Social media exploded with messages of support. People from the Philippines celebrated him like a national hero. Videos of his performance spread across the internet, topping millions of views within hours. Back in Manila, the neighbors who once heard him singing by the streets gathered around the tiny television sets, cheering and crying as they watched him shine. Children pointed at the screen and said they wanted to be like him. Vendors who once watched him perform for coins were now telling customers they knew the boy who made it big. When Juan returned home after filming, the airport in Manila was crowded with people waiting to welcome him. Despite the sudden fame, he remained humble, still helping his mother, still singing with the same sincerity he held from the beginning. He knew this was only the start of his journey, but he also understood something far deeper, that dreams can grow even in the poorest corners of the world, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one performance, one voice to change a life forever. Yet the world wasn't done with Juan. As he prepared for the live shows, he trained harder than ever. Voice coaches worked with him, but they quickly learned something important. His strength wasn't technical perfection, but emotional power. So they encouraged him to dig deeper into the stories of his childhood, to channel his struggles into the music. Each rehearsal brought him closer not only to the next stage, but also to himself. He learned to trust his voice, his heart, and his instinct. When the live show day arrived, he felt a familiar fear. But this time, he knew that millions around the world were cheering for him. Standing on the stage again, he remembered the nights on Manila's streets, the hunger, the exhaustion, the doubt. He remembered how people used to walk past him. And then he remembered the moment Simon hit the golden buzzer, the golden rain falling around him like a blessing from the universe. He opened his eyes, took a breath, and sang again, not as a street boy anymore, but as a rising star who had earned his place among the world's best. And when he finished, once again the world stood. For him, Juan had become a symbol of hope, proof that no matter where you come from, no matter how small your beginnings may be, if you have a voice, whether it's in singing, dreaming, or believing, it deserves to be heard. And sometimes, when the stars align, that voice reaches even the ears of someone like Simon Cowell, someone who has heard thousands of voices before but chooses to believe in yours. Juan's journey didn't end on that stage. It became the beginning of a new life, one full of possibilities. But he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the streets of Manila, the sound of the ocean near the bay, the tourists who dropped coins in his cup, the nights when he dreamed under the leaking roof, and most importantly, the mother who believed in him before anyone else did. His story would be told for years to come. Teachers would tell it to inspire their students. Parents would remind their kids never to give up. Singers around the world would see him and believe their voices mattered. And somewhere in Manila, another little boy or girl would pick up a microphone or guitar and whisper, "If Juan could do it, maybe I can too." Because sometimes, all it takes is a dream, a song, and the courage to step onto a stage, even when the world seems too big. Sometimes, the smallest voice can create the loudest echo. And Juan's echo was just beginning.